Alright, let's talk about rotations. If you're new to the game, rotations are how you move around the maps in PvP. There are 3 capture nodes and maybe 1 to 2 objectives to contest throughout each one. Where you decide to go at any given moment has a big impact on whether you win or lose. But most people overcomplicate things. In this video, we're going to start with the basics of rotating and then get more complicated as we go. Conquest is simple. Control more capture nodes than the enemy team for a longer period of time and you win. If you have 1 capture node and the enemy has 0, you are winning. If you have 2 and the enemy has 1, you are also winning. And if you have 3 and the enemy has 0, again, you are winning. If any of these are flipped, the enemy is winning, and you need to find the quickest and easiest ways to solve that issue. One of the best pieces of advice I can give is to follow the path of least resistance. In this case, resistance refers to how many enemies are at each capture node. The less players you have to contest, the easier it becomes. So if you have the choice between rotating into 2 enemies or 1 on an enemy cap, it's usually easier to push into the solo player. If choosing between 4 enemies or 0, go with 0. And those are the basics of rotating. If you're enjoying the content, leave a like on the video and let's move on to the intermediate section. Now there are 4 changing variables that will influence your rotations. First, the 3 states of the capture nodes. A friendly cap means your team controls the node. This inherently generates value for your team. Capturing and defending nodes will increase your chances of winning. A neutral node means neither team controls the node. After the initial opening split at the start of the match, neutral nodes are usually the result of players on either team neutralizing or decapping the nodes the other team controlled. If your team neutralizes the enemy node, they are gaining value by denying the enemy from gaining points for as long as the node remains neutralized. If the enemy team neutralizes a friendly node, they are gaining value for denying your team from gaining points for as long as the node remains neutralized. An enemy cap means the enemy team controls the node. This generates value for the enemy team. Neutralizing enemy caps as easily and quickly as possible is a priority. Second, the 3 states of an existing fight. When your team is winning a fight, ask yourself if your presence is still needed to secure the kills or cap the node. If not, you can leave to provide value to your team elsewhere. Winning a fight usually results in advancing the map state in your favor, but overstaying in a fight that's already won is wasting time. Stalemating means neither team is winning. Stalemating fights can extend indefinitely until affected by an outside influence. These are fine to take on friendly neutral nodes, but you want to avoid them on enemy nodes because they require an additional person from your team to rotate in to win them. This causes your team to be outnumbered on the rest of the map. When your team is losing a fight, your priority should be to disengage with as many members of your team alive as possible and either decap enemy nodes or defend nodes your team controls. Just because you lost a fight doesn't mean everyone has to die. Helping your teammates survive will help you survive, and will let you maintain pressure on the map so the enemy can't gain control over all 3 nodes. Third, the 3 types of matchups for any given fight. A winning matchup means your team is favored to win. You want to look for and take as many of these as possible. If you know you can easily beat a certain member on the enemy team, forcing that matchup multiple times is beneficial, as you are likely to continue gaining value by killing them. A stalemating matchup means neither team is favored to win. Stalemating matchups cause stalemating fights, which are ideal to take on friendly and neutral nodes, but you want to avoid taking these on enemy nodes because it forces one of your teammates to rotate in to break the stalemate. A losing matchup means the enemy team is favored to win. Avoid these completely. Losing a matchup once is fine if you aren't sure whether you win or lose against a certain player or build. However, if you repeatedly take a fight you have a high chance of losing or dying in, you are throwing your match. There is no reason to contest a losing matchup unless the match is close and dying on the node is going to win you the game. Aside from that, avoid losing matchups at all costs. Fourth, the 3 states of player numbers at any given fight. Outnumbering a fight means your team has a greater number of players than the enemy. This increases your chances of winning a fight and will often result in quick kills or a decap or full cap on an enemy controlled node. However, extended fights where your team outnumbers the enemy are very bad because it means your team is getting outnumbered on the other 2 nodes and or additional objectives. Thus, if your team outnumbers the enemy at a fight but it's clear that no kills or changes in the state of the capture node you're fighting at are changing, it is likely a good idea to rotate elsewhere to even out the numbers. Even numbers means both teams have the same amount of players. Fights with even numbers can go either way. These are usually skill-based fights assuming the matchups are even, however, they can also stalemate and require an outside influence to change. Getting outnumbered means the enemy team has a greater number of players than your team. Fighting outnumbered always generates value no matter which team controls the node as long as you survive. If the enemy team outnumbers you, your team is much more likely to get value on the rest of the map. However, if you get outnumbered and die quickly, it is extremely bad. The goal when you're you're outnumbered is to survive as long as possible. If you push into a 1v3 and die in 10 seconds, your team won't have time to capitalize off it and can get staggered by respawn timers. If you're 1vxing on an enemy node and all but one splits off to go elsewhere, push the 1v1 if you can quickly decap or kill the remaining enemy. If not, follow the enemy or enemies leaving and try to stall them as much as possible. Similarly, this also applies to larger fights. If your team is 3v4 at mid, you shouldn't overcommit. Playing defensively and staying alive makes it much more likely that you win the other two capture nodes. If you haven't already, don't forget to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel as we move on to the advanced section. Alright, for the advanced section, I'm going to hit you with the knowledge bomb right off the bat. Are you ready for this? Okay. Knowing when to rotate is just as important as knowing where to rotate. And I know you're wondering, when should I rotate blindside? When should I make that decision to leave a node I'm at and go elsewhere? And the answer is anytime any of the 4 variables change. But that's crazy, right? Because there are 3 nodes and 1 to 2 additional objectives that may be active. And if there are 4 variables that can change at any time that can influence your rotations, how in the world are you supposed to keep up with everything? Well, look at your minimap constantly, like all the time. Anytime you don't need to stare directly at a fight, you should be checking the minimap in your team's UI to get as much information as possible in regards to enemy positions, which matchups are being taken at what nodes, how the fights are going, and more. Anytime any of the 4 variables change anywhere on the map, you need to reevaluate your current situation and ask yourself whether this is the best place for you to be at the moment. If it is, then stay. If it is not, then leave. If you do this, you will be reactively rotating, absorbing information and making the best decisions you can based on what you know. Now, you may not be able to do this perfectly. It's difficult and there is a lot to keep track of. However, with practice comes perfection, and you'll make the correct decisions more frequently the more you do this. Staying flexible and adapting to the changing variables is the best way to rotate in PvP. Now for the fun part. Let's go over a progressing scenario to test your knowledge and decision making. I'll show 3 nodes on the screen. Blue nodes are friendly nodes, white nodes are neutral, and red nodes are controlled by the enemy. I will also show player numbers, the types of matchups, where enemies are rotating, and the state of existing fights. In each of these scenarios, you must choose where to rotate, and remember to think about why you're making that decision, because afterwards I will show you where I would have gone and explain my reasoning behind it. Now for scenario 1. It's the start of the match. Both teams split 1-4-0. The 4v4 at mid is stalemating, and both teams' side noders cap their nodes for free. Afterwards, the enemy side noder decides to rotate to mid. You are side noding for your team. Where should you rotate? Should you stay home? Should you rotate mid? Or should you rotate far? Remember to think about why you should make that decision based on what you've learned in this video. If you need extra time to think before I show you the answer, pause the video now. If you decided to rotate far, you are correct. Outnumbered fights on neutral and enemy nodes give your team opportunities to gain value elsewhere on the map. If your teammate is outnumbered on a friendly node, rotating to them to force an even fight is valuable. Home is not in any threat of getting decapped, so that means far is the rotation that generates guaranteed value, as long as the enemy side noder doesn't match your rotation. So the solution is to rotate far to push for the decap. Now for scenario 2. You rotated far and neutralized the node. Mid is still neutral, but your team is losing the 4v5, and there is a friendly cap at home. Where should you rotate? Should you rotate home? Should you rotate mid? Or should you stay at far? If you need extra time to think before I show you the answer, pause the video now. If you decided to rotate mid, you are correct. Home is not in any threat of getting decapped. There is no reason to rotate there. Your team is losing a fight on a neutral node. If you rotate there, you will force a fight with even numbers. Since your team is winning the map, forcing an even or stalemated fight on a neutral node is very valuable. So the solution is to rotate mid to force an even 5v5. Now for scenario 3. You rotated mid and made it a 5v5. The fight is stalemating. An enemy decides to split off from mid to neutralize your home node. Where should you rotate? Should you rotate home? Should you stay at mid? Or should you rotate far? Again, if you need extra time to think before I show you the answer, pause the video now. If you decided to rotate home, you are correct. Home is now in threat of getting decapped. If you stay at mid, your team will be 5v4ing the enemy on a neutral node. This gives the enemy team the path of least resistance. You neutralized far earlier in the match, so your team still has map control. So the solution is to rotate home to force an even 1v1 on a friendly node. And that's it for the scenarios. Comment down below how many you got right. This video was meant to explain and simplify rotations, which is an aspect of PvP that most players misunderstand or overcomplicate. Remember the following 3 key concepts in your games and you'll find much more success. The first is guaranteed value. Anytime you can advance the map state without any resistance from the enemy, go for it. The second is the path of least resistance. When deciding which node to rotate to, it is often better to move to the node with the lowest concentration of enemies. The third is matching numbers. When in doubt or when you have control over the map, matching numbers can ease pressure from your team or extend a lead. Now, if you found this video helpful, make sure you drop a like and subscribe to the channel for more Guild Wars 2 content.